Samuel Beckett was an Irish novelist, dramatist, short story writer and a theatre director. He was born on the 13th of April 1906 in Foxrock suburb of Dublin into a very religious family. However, later became agnostic, which is a perspective he included in a lot of his work. Beckett studied French, Italian and English in Trinity College Dublin from the years 1923 to 1927, in which he graduated with a bachelor's degree. After gaining experience at Campo College in Belfast, Beckett took up a role as a lecturer at a college in Paris from 1928 to 1930, which later led him to spend majority of his adult life in Paris, France. This is where Beckett met the well-known Irish author James Joyce and was extremely fascinated by him and his work. Both Beckett and Joyce shared their love for literature and determination to articulate their work in creative ways. Consequently, they formed a friendship over these similarities, and Beckett continued to assist Joyce in writing his famous novel Finnegan's Wake, and this is where his career as an author essentially started. Many people may argue that though Beckett was amazed by the complexity in Joyce's work, he had decided to go in the opposite direction, in which he used simple language within his writing and suggested that silence could sometimes hold more power than language itself. In a conversation with his mother, Beckett had said, "I realized that Joyce had gone as far as one could go in the direction of knowing more and being in control of one's material. He was always adding to it. You only had to look at his work to see that. I realized that my own way was in lack of knowledge, in taking away, in subtracting rather than adding." Throughout his career, Beckett wrote many different novels such as Morloy, Company, Murphy and What. But he gained special recognition and popularity through a play he wrote called Waiting for Godot. Waiting for Godot was originally written in French but was later translated into other languages including English. Furthermore, the play was first performed in a theatre in Paris in 1953, and it instantly attracted an audience that was so shocked by an appearance of a drama so different yet intriguing. People were so fascinated by the performance of Waiting for Godot that a new term was created for it, which was referred to as the theatre of the absurd. And the entire group of dramas which developed out of this was always associated with Samuel Beckett. Consequently, his contribution to this particular genre made him be known as the grandmaster and the father of the genre. Now getting to the point as to just why Waiting for Godot was seen as an absurd play. In the play, two men, Valdemar and Astragon, converse about many different topics whilst waiting for a man named Godot. They wait patiently until they receive news from a young man who claims to be a messenger from Godot that Godot will not be coming to meet them. The following day, both men come back in the initial meeting spot next to the tree and continue talking whilst waiting for Godot to arrive, as they do not give up on the hope that Godot will eventually come and meet them. However, the boy who claims to be Godot's messenger informs them that Godot is busy and he will meet Valdemar and Estragon the following day. When the men confront the messenger refuses to admit that he even saw the men the previous day, let alone engage in a conversation with them. By the end of the play, we see that both characters continue to wait for Godot, but he never arrives, and the cycle continues. Many critiques argue that nothing actually happens within Beckett's play, and it lacks a plot as it is simply about a group of friends in which one never attends their meetings. However, as mentioned before, Beckett was a writer who preferred to use a simplistic plot in which the silence is more powerful than the language itself. Therefore, it could be argued that the absurd and the simple play holds a significant message, and that Beckett uses metaphors alongside symbolism to portray a fundamental message to the post-war audience. Many people suggest that Beckett wrote about the character of Godot as a metaphor for God, hence implying that people always blindly hope for God to save them, without making any effort to save themselves first, and when this doesn't happen instantly, they hope that God will save them in the oncoming days, and the cycle repeats itself till the person eventually dies. This can be seen through the character of Godot, as everyone waits for him to arrive, but he never really does. This reflects Beckett's agnostic views, as it mimics his confusion as to whether there is a higher power known as God who will rescue the human race from its troubles or not. Perhaps this is why the audience never really know whether the character of Godot actually exists. This is definitely what made the play so popular, as it was absurd, yet somehow meaningful. Furthermore, it can also be argued that Beckett wrote this play to convey how people find meaning throughout their lives when the ultimate journey to life ends with death, suggesting that life is essentially meaningless. But we should learn to accept this and find happiness within it. This can be seen through the characters of Vladimir and Astrogan, as despite knowing that Godot is potentially never going to arrive, they go to the same meeting position every day waiting for him. Arguably, they do this to find meaning within their lives, and they're occupying themselves daily until they eventually die. And Beckett implies that both characters should stay happy and satisfied even when they are struggling to gain what they want, which is to meet Godot. This concept can be supported by a philosophical essay written in 1942 by Albert Camus called The Myth of Sisyphus. In his essay, Camus introduced the theory of the absurd, in which he explored the juxtaposition of the need of humans to find meaning in their lives and the unreasonable silence of the universe in response. This in essence relates to the characters of Vladimir and Astrogan, as they find meanings in their lives by waiting for Godot, despite the lack of response they have from the universe and even Godot himself. Furthermore, Camus also discusses that people spend their lives in a hope of a better tomorrow, but do not realize that tomorrow is another day closer to death. Tomorrow is the ultimate enemy. Therefore, people should learn to appreciate the present, no matter how bad the present circumstances are. In the final chapter of his essay, Camus compares the absurdity of human life with the situation of Sisyphus, a Greek mythology which was about a meaningless situation that consisted of pushing a boulder up a mountain only to see it roll back down. The essay concludes, the struggle itself is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Therefore, it can be implied that Beckett wants the characters in Waiting for Godot to be happy despite whether Godot actually arrives or not. This is a fundamental message that Beckett was trying to convey to the post-war generation. People had suffered an abundant amount during World War II by losing loved ones, not being able to see their loved ones, suffering from injuries, constant fear of death, and a collapsing economy, not to mention the emotional trauma the war had caused. Beckett himself had seen and experienced war firsthand when he had joined the French resistance, in which he worked as a courier in 1940. On many occasions, Beckett was nearly caught by the secret Nazi police services, but managed to escape. However, he saw how poorly the people who got caught were treated. In 1942, his unit was betrayed, and this led him to hide in a small village in France called Roussillon. The whole post-war generation, including Beckett himself, had suffered from the war and continued to suffer even when the war had ended because of the long-term damage it had caused. Even after the war had ended, people felt like their lives were stuck, that their lives became meaningless. They felt as if the joys and privileges of pre-war life were taken away from them. People unfortunately felt as if nothing could save them except from God, and hoped that God would take away their troubles and make their future better despite of what had happened in the past and what was happening in the present due to war. This can be seen in Beckett's play when the characters wait for Godot to arrive and hold high expectations from him. It could be argued that Beckett wrote Waiting for Godot as a metaphor to tell the post-war audience that people should not wait for a better tomorrow and should learn to find joy in the present no matter how hard this may be. They should find joy in the journey to turn their sorrow into happiness. They should not waste their lives waiting for a higher power to give them the gift of happiness. Though there are many interpretations of this play, an author named Miodrag Butovic had wrote a sequel named Godot Arrived, which explained what happened when Godot arrived and how everyone felt. Despite this, Beckett has never confirmed what the play is actually about. Because as we know, Beckett believed that silence was more powerful than the words themselves. So, what do you think? Was Waiting for Godot a play about nothing in particular, or did it hold a significant message to the post-war audience?